welcome back. If you don't know who I am Hailstone, the first person who did a mimic run only on YouTube. 2 days before Iron Pineapple did it. I'm a little salty about it, but I love the guy anyway. Love his content. Anyway, I am here with yet another run. This time, can Mausoleum soldiers beat Elden New Game Plus? Now, the same rules will apply as last time. Now, like the other video, I am following a few rules. I cannot deal any damage to the bosses. If I somehow do, I have to restart the fight. 2. I can only support the spirits. Now I can use spells akin to rejection, any healing and buffing effects, and proc status effects on foes as long as they don't do any damage. 3. If I hit too much of a wall in the run, I will call it then and there. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get started. First things first, the boss for the proof of concept, the ever-illustrious Treason. Now, overall, the Mausoleum soldiers took some decent damage from this fight, but just from their sheer numbers alone, I think their DPS will be their pure advantage in this overall run for New Game Plus. Well, that and their shields. The Mausoleum soldiers comprise of 2 greatsword users and 3 shield ones with at least 2 battle picks in there. They have at least decent survivability. From what I saw later on, their disappearing teleport doesn't really help them out that much, and their lack of mobility via running, as they typically tend to hide behind shields or slowly move up when charging up their attack, it made for a difficult thing to adapt for me using them later on, unfortunately. Now, next, we are off to Margit the Fell Omen once more. And truly, they just absolutely wailed on him. He wasn't able to damage them too much. He was definitely able to do decent overall damage, but a combination of, once more, just their numbers, the buff I put on them, and their shields, he wasn't able to do too much. He often spent his time just trying to switch between targets, and it didn't work out well. Though, I will admit, the Mausoleum soldiers are unfortunately very squishy in most of these fights, and it requires a lot of constant healing from Erd Tree Heal, which devastates my Cerulean tier supply. But regardless of what I think, they managed to swarm him and ultimately damage him just enough to get him killed. With Margit down, we moved on to Godric the Grafted. Now, for this, I sped up the video a little bit just because the fight took kind of long, but also not that anything really unique happened in it. They wailed on him, he went down, nothing really special. The only difference is here, I more or less switched over from using Golden Vow to two-handing the Commander Sphere for Rallying Standard to see if it would be any overall improvement to their stats. Guess it kinda did. I don't notice a significant difference, but regardless, it doesn't last as long, that's for sure. not too much to say about the Red Wolf of Radagon. Their numbers gave them the advantage, and in sheer DPS, it couldn't survive. Now on to the most arduous fight of this entire video. Fighting Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, was agonizing. My fears that I had with the Mimic tier were realized in full here. I did this fight about 2 times. This one that are seeing is a sped up time of the second one, which is sped up because it was 50 minutes long of the overall fight against Rennala, which should not have been this hard. I could not keep the Mausoleum soldiers contained and fighting one thing. I had to go get rejection in order to try and break Rennala's bubble just enough and try to position the soldiers so that they would attack her. But overall, this was such a massive slog. The first phase took so long to get through. Oh man, it was truly, truly awful. I mean, it was so freaking frustrating. I literally every single fear I had that the Mimic tier was going to have with this is encapsulated in the soldiers not being able to damage Rennala enough. I was able to ultimately rally them, just position them just perfectly enough so at least a few of them did damage her. It wasn't the... It's just so bad. Now, when we finally got to the second phase, it was rather short and kind of went as you would expect. The Mausoleum soldiers' numbers were their advantage here, and their DPS, Rennala simply couldn't resist it, especially being buffed by the rallying standard. Now, something that was fun I found out about this fight is Rennala is incredibly susceptible to being freaking ponged. It is the best thing in the world. Just knocking her back towards the Mimic soldiers just to get wailed on in a small, shredded group of a bloodbath was fucking fantastic. She couldn't do anything. Rejection versus Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, is one of the best things I have ever done. It's great. It was fantastic. Quickly after Renala, we come once more to the Dragonic Tree Sentinel, and the Mausoleum soldiers managed to kind of beat him into a corner, quite literally, which it was nothing but a back and forth of them kind of stunning him and him stunning him. And he actually managed to kill one of the Mausoleum soldiers, although it mattered little as they quickly finished him off not too long after, although this fight required a lot of healing. Following the Draconic's Tree Sentinel, it was versus Godfrey the Golden Shade. As unrelenting as he was in the fight with the Mimic Tier, he was a very large threat here. Although, unlike the multitude of tries I needed to do with the Mimic Tier run, I did not need to put in as near as much effort when dealing with him, although I had to constantly heal the Mimics as they could barely hold the damage and they were constantly put into riposte states. And honestly, I thought it might have been the end for them here, but they defied my expectations. I feel like that's going to end up happening a lot. After Godfrey was defeated, it was once more time to challenge the Golden Lord himself, the King of Lindell, Margot. Now, this was yet another fight that only took one try, and I'm pretty sure most of this is just always due to the sheer number of DPS the Mausoleum soldiers can get off. That, coupled with the survivability of their shields, and kind of in part to the teleportation, overall leads them to just doing okay. Although, this fight going forward, we started to run into quite a lot of issues, mostly the mobility of the Mausoleum soldiers themselves and their survivability, and they were just starting to get slowly picked off one by one in following fights. Sadly, this is where the run came to a screeching halt. The Mausoleum soldiers versus the Fire Giant. These battles probably took about 3 times as long as the fight with Renala, Queen of the Full Moon went. It's just in this fight alone where their lack of ranged attacks, aggressiveness, and low mobility, coupled with the fact that they really like prioritizing their invisible teleports to try and confuse the enemy, really didn't come in hand. Unfortunately, they could do at least a decent tiny amount to the Fire Giant in terms of damage, but I only really managed to get them to broke the bracelet on his ankle at least once. Every following time, I just ended up with death after death on my part, and I ended up deciding, after reviewing the footage, I just decided I don't think they're going to get past the Fire Giant. Especially if he gets to his second phase and starts rolling around, they weren't going to make it. And especially during this part of the fight, I was already hemorrhaging the Cerulean Tear Flasks. I was not going to be able to keep up with keeping them alive. That was just the unfortunate part, and I had to call it here. It was a decent run, though. The Mausoleum soldiers are incredibly decent distraction and damage dealers if you just need something to back you up in any of your future playthroughs, so They really are good. I will not stump them for being bad. They are pretty, like, good mediocre average tier. They're not bad whatsoever. They are, in fact, quite good.